I spent 6 years building my company's biggest client portfolio, sleeping in airports, skipping holidays, and fixing disasters no one else could handle. My boss promised me the director position. Everyone in the office knew it was mine. Then the promotion meeting finally happened, and he gave the job to his golfing buddy's daughter, who had worked here for only 6 months. That same afternoon, 3 of our biggest clients called me, not the company. And that's when I realized something my boss clearly hadn't thought about. Those $4 million contracts weren't loyal to the company. They were loyal to me. Stick with me, because that moment was the beginning of everything changing. My name is Marina Caldwell, and at the time I was a senior client strategist at North Bay Corporate Consulting in Chicago. It's a mid-sized advisory firm that works with large businesses that need help fixing big problems. For 6 years, I was the person they called whenever something started falling apart. If a deal was about to collapse, they sent me. If a client was angry, they sent me. If a project was failing, somehow it always ended up on my desk. I didn't complain. I believed hard work would eventually pay off. My boss, Harold Whitmore, had been telling me the same thing for almost 2 years. "You're next in line, Marina," he would say. "Just keep doing what you're doing." So I did. I worked late nights. I answered emails during holidays. I spent more time in airports than in my own apartment. And slowly, one by one, I built relationships with some of the company's biggest clients. Several of them trusted me so much that they specifically requested me on every project. That's how those multi-million-dollar contracts happened. So when the promotion meeting was scheduled, no one in the office questioned it. My coworkers were already congratulating me before the announcement even happened. But when Harold stood at the front of the room that morning, everything changed. He smiled and proudly introduced our new director, Lydia Grant. The room went silent. Lydia had been working there for only 6 months. She barely understood how most of our clients operated. In fact, half the time she came to me asking how to fix problems she had created. People around the table exchanged shocked looks. But Harold looked completely comfortable, and Lydia looked prepared. That's when the truth became obvious. This decision had been made long before that meeting, because Lydia wasn't just another employee. Her father had been golfing with Harold for years. So while everyone else sat there stunned, I simply smiled and nodded politely like a professional. But inside, something quietly broke. And later that evening, my phone started ringing. The office felt different the very next day. It was quiet in a strange way, like everyone was trying to pretend nothing had happened. People still said good morning, but their voices were softer. Some coworkers gave me small, awkward smiles, like they didn't know what to say. Lydia, however, seemed very comfortable in her new role. By lunchtime, she was already acting like my supervisor. She walked past my desk and casually dropped a stack of papers on it. "Marina, I'll need you to organize these client reports for tomorrow," she said. For a moment, I thought she was joking. Those kinds of tasks were usually handled by junior staff, not someone who managed multi-million-dollar accounts. But Lydia just stood there, waiting. So I simply nodded and said, "Sure." Inside, though, I could feel the humiliation building. Over the next few days, it only got worse. Instead of asking for my strategic advice, Lydia started assigning me small administrative work. Updating documents, scheduling calls, preparing slides for meetings she would lead. The same meetings I used to run. Meanwhile, Harold suddenly became very hard to find. Every time I passed him in the hallway, he looked busy or quickly walked the other direction. When we did cross paths, he barely made eye contact. It was like he knew exactly what he had done. A few coworkers quietly stopped by my desk during the week. Most of them said the same thing. "We thought the promotion was yours." One colleague even shook his head and whispered. Everyone did. Then one afternoon, I overheard something that explained everything. 2 employees were talking in the break room about Lydia's father. Apparently, he and Harold had been golfing together for years. They were close friends. One of them even mentioned that Lydia's position had basically been promised before she was officially hired. Hearing that felt like someone poured cold water over me. 6 years of loyalty. 6 years of solving problems and bringing in clients. And none of it mattered. The moment that really changed things happened a few days later during a meeting with one of our biggest clients. Lydia was presenting a strategy plan. My strategy plan. I recognized every slide. Every detail came from the work I had spent weeks preparing. And as she spoke, Lydia confidently took credit for all of it. I stayed quiet and watched the client's reaction. But something interesting happened. When the client started asking deeper questions, Lydia struggled to answer. She hesitated and glanced toward me more than once. Finally, the client turned directly to me. "Marina, what do you think?" In that moment, I noticed something very clear. Everyone in that room trusted me. Not Lydia. Not Harold. Me. 3 days after the promotion meeting, I was sitting at my desk early in the morning, trying to focus on work. My phone rang, and when I looked at the screen, I saw a name that immediately got my attention. Daniel Mercer. He was the CEO of Redwood Logistics, one of North Bay's biggest clients. I had worked with Daniel for almost 4 years, helping his company solve several major problems. Over time, we had built a strong professional relationship. I answered the call. "Good morning, Daniel," I said calmly. But his voice sounded different than usual. "Marina, I just heard something that confused me," he said. I stayed quiet and listened. "I was told Lydia Grant will now be leading our strategy meetings. Is that correct?" For a second, I didn't know what to say. I had expected this moment eventually, but hearing it directly from him still felt strange. "Yes," I replied carefully. "Lydia is the new director now." There was a short silence on the phone. Then Daniel spoke again, and this time his voice was much more direct. "Marina, I'm going to be honest with you," he said. "If you're not leading this project, I'm not comfortable continuing the same way." His words surprised me, but I kept my voice professional. "Daniel, North Bay still has a full team supporting your account," I said. "I'm sure Lydia will." He interrupted me. "No," he said firmly. "We hired North Bay because of you." I didn't respond right away. Daniel continued speaking. "You understand our business. You know our problems. Every solution that has worked for us came from your strategy." Hearing that meant more than he probably realized. Then he said something that stayed in my mind long after the call ended. "Marina," he said, "if you ever decide to start your own consulting firm, call me first." For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. Start my own firm? The idea had never seriously crossed my mind before. I had always believed my future was inside North Bay. I thought loyalty and hard work would eventually lead to leadership. But now that belief was starting to crack. Daniel finished the call politely, and we discussed the next meeting. When the conversation ended, I slowly set my phone down on the desk. For the rest of the day, his words kept replaying in my mind. "If you ever start your own consulting firm, call me first." For the first time, I began to seriously consider something I had never thought about before. Leaving. But simply leaving the company wouldn't be enough. That wouldn't feel like justice. Real revenge would be something else entirely. Real revenge would be watching Harold Whitmore realize exactly what he had lost. After that phone call with Daniel, things at the office kept getting worse. Lydia didn't just act like the new director. She started interfering with the relationships I had spent years building with clients. Suddenly, she was scheduling important meetings without even telling me first. Sometimes I would only find out about a meeting because a client asked me why I wasn't there. When Lydia did lead those meetings, the results were not good. She gave advice that clearly showed she didn't understand the client's businesses. I could hear the confusion in their voices during calls. A few days later, 2 different clients contacted me privately. Both conversations were very similar. One of them said carefully, "Marina, I don't want to cause trouble, but Lydia doesn't seem to understand our situation." Another client was even more direct. "Are you still involved with our account?" he asked. Because the last meeting didn't make much sense. I tried to stay professional. I reassured them that the company was still working on their strategy. But each conversation made one thing clearer. The clients trusted me, not Lydia. Meanwhile, Harold kept calling me into his office. His tone was always polite, but the message was the same every time. "Marina, I need you to support Lydia's leadership," he would say. Support her leadership. Even though I had been doing this job for 6 years and Lydia had barely started. The real breaking point came during a large strategy meeting with another major client. Lydia was presenting the plan. Halfway through the meeting, she suddenly criticized one of the strategies on the slide. "My team originally suggested this direction," she said, "but I'm not sure it's the best approach." The strategy she was criticizing was mine. I stayed calm and waited. Then the client started asking questions. Detailed questions. Within seconds, Lydia looked completely lost. She flipped through the slides, searching for answers she clearly didn't have. Finally, she looked straight at me. "Marina, maybe you can explain this better," she said nervously. So I did. I walked the client through the full strategy, answered every concern, and explained the long-term plan. By the end of the meeting, the client was satisfied and agreed to move forward. Once again, the deal was saved. But that night, something inside me had changed. I opened my laptop at home and started reviewing the contracts I had personally secured over the years. As I read through them carefully, I noticed something important. Many of those agreements listed me as the primary strategic consultant, which meant something very serious. If I wasn't involved in the projects anymore, clients had the right to end their contracts. And suddenly, leaving the company didn't feel like just an idea anymore. It felt like a real possibility. A few days after I started reviewing those contracts, another call came in that changed the way I looked at everything. This time it was Trent Holloway. Trent was the founder of Blue Peak Manufacturing, one of the most important clients I had brought to North Bay. I had worked with him closely for almost 2 years, helping his company expand into new markets. When I answered the call, his voice sounded serious. "Marina, can I ask you something honestly?" he said. "Of course," I replied. There was a short pause before he continued. "Are you happy at North Bay right now?" The question surprised me. Clients usually didn't ask personal questions like that. I stayed careful with my words. "Why do you ask?" I said. Trent sighed quietly on the phone. "Because things feel different lately," he explained. "The last few meetings haven't been the same. And Lydia doesn't seem to understand our strategy." I listened without interrupting. Then he added something that really caught my attention. "You're not the only one noticing this," he said. "A few other clients mentioned it too. So it wasn't just me." Several clients had already started seeing the changes inside the company. Trent continued speaking in a calm but direct tone. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you," he said. "The reason we signed with North Bay was because of you." Hearing that made my chest tighten a little. I had spent years building those relationships, but I never expected clients to say it so openly. Then Trent said something that completely stopped me for a moment. "If you ever leave North Bay," he said slowly, "I'd rather work with you personally than with that firm." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there holding the phone. For the second time in a week, a major client had told me the same thing. We finished the call professionally, discussing a few updates for the next project meeting. But after I hung up, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. A realization slowly started forming in my mind. For years, I had believed I was just another employee working for a company. But now something much bigger was becoming clear. I wasn't just working with the clients. I was the reason many of them stayed. That thought was both exciting and a little scary. Later that evening, I opened my laptop again. This time I wasn't reviewing contracts. I started researching something new. What it would actually take to start my own consulting firm. At first it felt like a wild idea. But the more I read and calculated costs, the more interesting the numbers became. And slowly, everything started adding up. After my conversation with Trent, I knew I couldn't ignore the idea anymore. If I was going to do something this big, I needed to be careful. I didn't want to make a mistake that could ruin my career. So instead of talking to coworkers or friends, I decided to get professional advice. A week later, I scheduled a private meeting with a business attorney named Evelyn Cross. Her office was in a quiet building downtown. I brought copies of several contracts I had worked on over the years. Evelyn listened carefully while I explained my situation. I told her about the promotion, Lydia's new role, and how several clients had started calling me directly. Then she asked the most important question. "Are you thinking about leaving the company?" she said. I nodded. Evelyn spent the next hour reviewing the contracts one by one. She read every detail slowly, occasionally making small notes. I sat quietly, waiting for her opinion. Finally, she closed the folder and looked at me. "Well," she said calmly, "there's something important you should know." My heart started beating a little faster. "These agreements don't belong to you personally," she explained. "But many of them clearly name you as the primary strategic consultant." I leaned forward slightly. "And that means something very important," she continued. "If you resign from North Bay, the clients are free to decide who they want to work with. So the company can't stop them?" I asked. Evelyn shook her head. "No. As long as you don't actively recruit them before leaving, they have the legal right to choose their consultant." That answer changed everything. When I left her office that afternoon, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time, I knew exactly where I stood. Over the next few weeks, I started preparing quietly. I didn't tell anyone at work about my plans. I continued doing my job like normal. I attended meetings, answered emails, and helped solve client problems. Meanwhile, Lydia kept making mistakes. She gave poor advice in meetings and often confused clients with unclear strategies. I could see the frustration growing in their faces. Harold still treated everything like business as usual. Whenever we spoke, he acted as if I would always stay loyal to the company. Maybe he believed I had no other choice. Maybe he thought I would never leave after investing 6 years of my life there. But behind the scenes, I was building a simple plan. I wouldn't ask clients to follow me. I wouldn't pressure anyone. I would simply resign. And then I would let the clients decide what they wanted to do. What Harold didn't realize was that his biggest mistake had already happened. And he had no idea what was coming next.
Monday morning arrived faster than I expected. I woke up early that day and sat quietly at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. On the table in front of me was a single piece of paper, my resignation letter. It was short and simple. Just a formal notice that I was leaving North Bay Corporate Consulting. No complaints. No explanations. Just the date and my signature. For a moment I looked at it and thought about the last 6 years of my life. The long flights. The late nights. The deals I saved when everything seemed ready to fall apart. Then I folded the paper and placed it in my bag. When I arrived at the office, everything looked normal. People were walking to meetings, typing at their desks, talking quietly near the coffee machine. No one had any idea what I was about to do. I walked straight to Harold's office and knocked on the door. "Come in," he said. He looked up from his laptop when I stepped inside. "Morning, Marina," he said casually. I walked over to his desk and placed the envelope in front of him. "I'm submitting my resignation," I said calmly. For a second, he just stared at the paper. Then he opened it and quickly read the letter. His face changed immediately. "Wait, what?" he said, looking up at me in shock. "I'm leaving the company," I replied. Harold leaned back in his chair, clearly surprised. For a moment, he looked like he didn't believe it. "Marina, let's slow down," he said. "You're upset about the promotion. I understand that." I stayed quiet. "You've been a valuable employee here," he continued quickly. "We can talk about your future. There will be other opportunities, other promotions." The same vague promises he had been making for years. But this time they meant nothing to me. "I appreciate that," I said politely, "but my decision is final." Just then the office door opened slightly. Lydia had clearly been listening from the hallway. She stepped inside with a small smile on her face. "Well," she said lightly, "I'm sure the company will manage just fine." Her tone was confident, almost smug. I simply smiled back at her. Neither of them knew something very important. While we were standing there talking, my phone was sitting quietly in my bag. And on that phone were already 3 meeting requests from clients. Clients who wanted to speak with me. Not North Bay. The week after I left North Bay was one of the busiest weeks of my life. Instead of rushing to an office every morning, I spent my time setting up something new. I registered my company name, opened business accounts, and finished the legal paperwork. By the end of that week, my consulting firm officially existed. Caldwell Strategic Advisors. It felt strange seeing the name printed on official documents. For years I had worked under someone else's company. Now, everything depended on me. But I followed the plan I had promised myself. I did not contact a single North Bay client. I didn't send emails. I didn't make calls. I didn't try to convince anyone to leave. I simply announced online that I had started my own consulting firm and that I was now available for new projects. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait very long. The first call came 3 days later. It was Daniel Mercer from Redwood Logistics. His voice sounded calm but direct, just like always. "Marina," he said, "I heard you started your own firm." "Yes, I did," I replied. "Well," he continued, "Redwood would like to move our consulting contract to Caldwell Strategic Advisors." Even though I expected something like this, hearing it still felt surreal. Daniel explained that his team trusted my strategy and wanted me to continue leading their projects. Within a few days, the paperwork was completed and the contract officially moved. But that was only the beginning. A few days later, Trent Holloway from Blue Peak Manufacturing called me. His message was almost identical. "We want to keep working with you," he said. "So, we're moving our consulting agreement to your firm." Two more major clients followed soon after. Each conversation felt very similar. Every client explained their decision in simple words. We hired you, not the company. Within a few weeks, Caldwell Strategic Advisors had several large contracts already in place. The numbers were much bigger than I expected when I first started planning. By the end of the first month, nearly $4 million in consulting contracts had left North Bay. The clients hadn't been pressured. They simply chose who they trusted. Meanwhile, I started hearing rumors from former coworkers. The office was suddenly chaotic. Lydia was struggling to manage accounts, and leadership was trying to understand why major clients were leaving. That's when Harold Whitmore finally realized what had happened. The employee he thought he could replace had just taken the company's most valuable relationships with her. And the damage had already been done. After nearly $4 million in contracts moved to my firm, North Bay began to feel the impact immediately. Meetings that were once smooth now seemed tense. Projects slowed down, deadlines started slipping, and clients who remained were clearly nervous. The company was struggling without the accounts I had managed for years. Harold Whitmore quickly realized something was wrong. He called a meeting with the legal team, threatening to take action. But after reviewing the contracts, the lawyers shook their heads. There was nothing they could do. Every contract I had left listed me as the primary consultant, and the clients had chosen to follow me voluntarily. North Bay had no legal standing to stop them. Meanwhile, Lydia completely fell apart. The tasks that had been simple for me suddenly became overwhelming for her. She tried to manage the remaining accounts, but her lack of experience and understanding of the client's needs made things worse. Emails piled up, phone calls went unanswered, and even minor issues turned into crises. Her confidence, which had seemed so strong the day she got promoted, disappeared under the pressure. During this time, a few employees quietly reached out to me. They asked if I was hiring or if there might be opportunities at Caldwell Strategic Advisors. Some spoke in whispers in the hallways, worried about losing their own clients or struggling under the new management. Their messages were small, but they told me that people inside North Bay were watching the shift closely. Outside the office, the story began to spread. Industry rumors started circulating about why North Bay had lost so many clients so quickly. People whispered about favoritism, incompetence, and the employee who had left to start her own firm. It wasn't long before my professional reputation grew even stronger. I was seen as someone who earned clients' trust through skill and dedication, not just a title on a door. Harold's reputation took a serious hit. Former colleagues and industry contacts who once respected him began questioning his judgment. And for the first time, I heard through the grapevine that he regretted his decision to promote Lydia over me. But it was too late. North Bay had already lost its most important relationships, and I had already built something better for myself. I didn't need to gloat or confront him. The consequences were clear, and the outcome was final. He had chosen favoritism over talent, and the cost was enormous. 1 year after leaving North Bay, Caldwell Strategic Advisors had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. What had started as a small, quiet plan had turned into one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region. The contracts I had brought in, combined with new clients who had heard about my work, created a solid foundation. I had built a team of professionals who valued hard work, respect, and merit above all else. Every member of my staff knew that success came from skill and dedication, not favoritism or connections. Watching them thrive reminded me of why I had left my old company. This was the kind of environment I had always wanted. Many of my former North Bay clients remained loyal. They trusted me, not a company name, and that trust translated into strong, long-term partnerships. Seeing the same faces from old projects smiling and confident in our meetings felt rewarding in a way that no title or promotion ever had. One afternoon, I attended a regional business conference. The room was buzzing with industry professionals, and I was presenting a short talk on strategic client management. Afterward, as I walked through the crowd, I noticed a familiar face. Harold Whitmore. He approached me, a hesitant smile on his face. "Marina," he said awkwardly, "congratulations on everything you've accomplished. Your firm is impressive." I nodded politely and smiled. "Thank you, Harold," I said. I didn't step closer, and I didn't offer more than a polite acknowledgement. I didn't need to. The real victory had nothing to do with yelling, arguing, or showing off. The real revenge was far simpler. He had made a choice. He had chosen favoritism over talent. He had chosen a short-term personal connection over 6 years of hard work, dedication, and loyalty. And that choice had cost him millions of dollars and the best employee he ever had. Meanwhile, I had built something better. Something sustainable, respected, and growing. A place where people were recognized for their skills, where clients were valued, and where hard work truly mattered. As I left the conference that day, I felt a sense of peace. I had no need to look back or worry about what Harold thought. The results spoke for themselves. My firm was thriving, my clients were happy, and I had finally created the professional life I deserved. I had turned betrayal into opportunity, disappointment into strategy, and unfairness into success. And I never looked back. If you've ever felt overlooked at work, remember Marina's story. Building strong skills, maintaining client trust, and knowing your worth can create opportunities beyond any company. Focus on your value, document your achievements, and never rely solely on promises. Your expertise can open doors to independence and long-term success.